Welcome back. Now, U.S. President Donald Trump's son-in-law and senior advisor Jared Kushner met Israeli and Palestinian leaders on Wednesday to try to revive the stalled Middle East peace process, or MEPP. Now, Kushner met Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu in Jerusalem, and these are the pictures of that meeting on your screens now, and also met Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas, who you see on your screens now, in Ramallah. Now, Kushner's visit comes at a time when he himself faces increased scrutiny over his connections to Russia amid the probe into that country's alleged interference in the 2016 U.S. presidential election.
This is an opportunity to pursue our common goals of security, prosperity, and peace. And Jared, I welcome you here in that spirit. I know of your efforts, the President's efforts, and I look forward to working with you to achieve these common goals.
Thank you. The President sends his best regards, and it's an honor to be here with you.
Now, President Donald Trump has given Kushner the responsibility of laying the groundwork, as it were, for securing what he calls an ultimate deal between the Israelis and Palestinians. Kushner's visit to West Asia follows Trump's visit to the region last month, when the U.S. president also had discussions with the Israelis and Palestinians. Now, President Trump had vowed to do whatever necessary to clinch a peace deal between Israel and Palestine. Trump had offered no clues, however, about how he could break the deadlock and revive the long-stalled negotiations. There's been no breakthrough in talks between the two sides, as Palestine demands that Israel stop building what it calls illegal settlements on Palestinian land. The previous Obama administration tried hard for a two-state solution but was unsuccessful in bringing the two sides to the negotiating table. All right, joining me now for continuing our discussion on Kushner's visit or foray into West Asia is Karl, American intelligence officer, former intelligence officer and writer, and a keen watcher of global diplomacy. Hello there, Glenn. Good to have you back on WION. And yesterday, if you remember, we were discussing or previewing Kushner's visit to West Asia. And today, now that he has met both sides of the divide, as it were, what are your big takeaways from what whatever you've been hearing or reading about his visit to the region?
Well, it's hard to know what the Trump administration wants to do, because to the extent that it says much about policy issues, it says contradictory things. However, there has been, it appears, to the extent there's a coherent policy, it has been a shift by the United States to support more directly and strongly, align itself more strongly with the Sunni faction in the various Middle Eastern crises, which largely means with Saudi Arabia and allied states. Now, how that would affect the peace process, or what one would hope would be a peace process between Israel and Palestine, I could see there is talk of some sort of an effort for a grand bargain. Everyone's always trying to get a grand bargain, but this one would have the Saudis and the Sunni pressure Iran, Hezbollah, and Hamas, which is supported by Hezbollah, by Iran, although it is not Shia, in exchange for some sort of a state entity for the Palestinians. But it's shaping up that it would be really a rump state and not especially viable, or one that the Palestinians really want. Now, all of that sounds coherent. I think that analysts like myself and you tend to attribute more coherent thinking and direction to policy than there is, but that is conceivable, at least, as a direction that the Trump administration would seek to go, which would make Israel of Netanyahu quite happy, because it would guarantee Israeli security, eliminate the threats, and make Palestine really nothing much of an issue.
Indeed. And Glenn, you used the phrase a grand bargain. Now, some might say there is another way of looking at it. Talks would inevitably mean compromise. Now, my question to you is the following. Is Israel willing to compromise?
Well, Israel, for all of the crises and chaos around it, Israel is in a strategically secure position right now. It has no existential threat to it, and the threats from terrorism, although painful, are not existential and are to a large extent controlled. So Israel, I think, under Netanyahu, might be willing to grant statehood, which is a rump state with no, as one pundit here called it, they might get to have a fife and drum band and a flag, and that's about it. And it would be part of the West Bank, and yet the Israeli settlements would largely remain. So Israel would get most everything, and I don't see Israel being willing to give up much except for the formal acknowledgement of peace. But all of this is so speculative. But that seems to be to the extent there is a coherent direction, the noises that we're hearing.
Glenn, let me rephrase that question. I mean, when I talked about compromise, I meant give and take. So what is Israel, or what might be Israel willing to give in return for what the Palestinians might be willing to, offer Israel?
Right. Well, that's the critical question for everyone, and certainly for the Palestinians. But it appears under Netanyahu they would be willing to grant the acknowledgement of statehood if the state of Palestine were defined in a way that denied it the current, most of the current Israeli settlements on the West Bank and the attributes of state power, which would be military. And of course, the right of return of Palestinian refugees to lands now part of Israel, I can't imagine Israel ever accepting. So concessions from the part of the Netanyahu Israel, I don't see a lot.
Right. So, as you mentioned, right of return. Now, there are other contentious issues as well. The pre-67 borders, for one, a right of return, as you pointed out, East Jerusalem as the capital of the future state of Palestine. All that said, Glenn, the Israelis, on the other hand, some of them at least, are demanding the creation of what they call the Jewish state of Israel. Would that be something which the international community at large, especially the EU, who are prime partners or coalition partners of the US, be willing to accept going forward?
Well, certainly not in a formal sense. Israel, a democracy by definition, can't really be an exclusively religious state. For a state exclusive for one religion, or primarily one religion. That's one of the internal historic contradictions at birth of Israel. It's a democracy and it is a Jewish state. It cannot, in a pure sense, be both. But if it no longer is a Jewish state, then it's no longer really Israel. So that is part of the problem. And I could see the right-wing-controlled governments and governments of Israel moving in that direction. Certainly, if one goes to Israel, in Jerusalem, and just observes the political process in the country as a whole, the rise of the far right, the religious right, over the last 40 years has been striking. And to an internationalist or a secularist, alarming. But that is a fact, and they're creating realities on the ground. Jerusalem has changed its nature in the last 40 years, has become more divided as the ultra-Orthodox Jews and the besieged Palestinians now define the city. It's less cosmopolitan than before in a lot of ways. All of this is disturbing. I could see it happening. In fact, formally, I don't know. Don't think so.
Right. And Glenn, what many commentators around the world, including you and I at the moment, are discussing it as if it were a bilateral dispute between two parties. Now, we know, and we've been talking about it, it's also a regional dimension to all of this. Remember, we're talking about, or some people talk about, all occupied territory, meaning thereby that we cannot dismiss the issue of Golan Heights with Syria, or Sheba Farms with Lebanon. So some people are calling for a package solution to this dispute, as it were. Are you in favor of a comprehensive package solution, or are you willing to take an incremental approach whereby you challenge or tackle one issue at a time?
Well, I think, like most international observers, most of the international community thinks that there is a solution that both parties have failed to grasp, which is the two-state solution, some adjustments to the 1967 borders. The Shiva farms and the Golan Heights Israel has always indicated willingness to discuss those, but these are prize bargaining chips that they'll hold until the end also. However, neither party, the Palestinians nor the Israeli government, however it is constituted, have really been willing at the critical moment to agree. Finger pointing is pretty powerful there, rather than assumption of responsibility. So there are strong cases to be made that the Palestinians under Arafat missed the golden opportunity when President Clinton was in office, and that the Israelis continue to undermine themselves because strategically they are in the driver's seat right now. The Palestinians are the demanding, weaker party. So a grand bargain, no one's managed one for 50 years. I'm in favor of achieving what's achievable, and if there were incremental steps, of course. I'm not sure what they would be now, actually.
Indeed. Glenn, we have a fascinating conversation going, but unfortunately we're out of time. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts and perspectives on this vexed issue, as it were. That was Glenn Karl, American writer, analyst, and former intelligence officer with me on WION Tonight.